This video is powered by the pros at Pascal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPascal.com.
Again, Teddy Cahill, Baseball America, joining us now. Teddy, I want to start with the question we kind of pondered yesterday. The amount of SEC teams that could be named as top 8 seeds in this upcoming NCAA tournament. Do you think the selection committee is okay with having 5 of the top 8 teams hailing from the Southeastern Conference if it plays out like that?
No is my general lean. Like, we've never seen anything like that. This season is strange. If you look at RPI, the top 10 is the top 8, I guess, really, is absolutely loaded up with SEC teams. There are like 6 of them in the top 8, I guess, right now. But there's still a couple weeks to be played here. You know, some of these teams still have to play each other. I think ultimately it won't shake out at 5, but it's possible right now, I would say.
I want to ask you about the team in Baum-Walker Stadium in Arkansas. They've got a really good RPI. They're within the top 5 of a lot of different rankings. Teddy, when you look at the Razorbacks and what they've done with this season, they've got South Carolina, Vanderbilt, and Hoover remaining. Are you confident this team, after having to go on the road to Stillwater and Chapel Hill, are you confident this team is going to be a national seed when the selection comes out with their selections?
Reasonably so right now. These last 2 weekends are not easy with South Carolina and at Vanderbilt, and they're going to need to win some of those games. They can't just rest on their laurels at this point. But I do believe that this team is probably going to have some home games in the postseason, and I think that they're in a really good shape to be a top 8 seed this year, yeah.
So what's at stake this weekend? You got 3 versus 5 in the RPI. You've got, whichever poll you're looking at, where they're at in the rankings, both well within the top 10. What do you think's at stake? I kind of agree with you. There might be 4, won't be 5 from the SEC in the top 8 national seeds. What do you think's at stake this weekend in Fayetteville?
I just think it's a really good opportunity for Arkansas. You're 28-3 at home. You have South Carolina coming in, and they're clearly in a bit of a funk here. They've lost the last couple of weekends. They lost yesterday to North Florida. They're dealing with their own injuries, and whether those are what's holding them back right now, or whether they're just struggling on the mound or whatever. It's an opportunity to go head to head against a team that you're competing with for one of those top 8 seeds. You get them at home. You get them at a good time. I think it's just a great opportunity for Arkansas, more than it's a must win for South Carolina. Like, both of those teams will have their opportunity the following weekend as well. But for Arkansas, having to go on the road against Vanderbilt, I just think this is a weekend to get a couple of wins and just continue to position yourself as well as possible.
When you look at the RPI and you got Kentucky at number 1, LSU's at 3, Arkansas's at 5. You mentioned how top heavy it was with the SEC, and really the SEC and the ACC are dominating the top of this. Does that match up with the eye test? When you watch the games, you see the teams. Does the eye test and the polls, the eye test and the RPI, how in sync are those for you?
I think RPI is a little funky this year. You can say that a lot of years, and honestly, it doesn't matter at the end of the day, because the committee doesn't. They have their own version of the eye test, but this is the metric that they're choosing to use. And in general, I would say the RPI is probably doing a pretty good job this year, but you have to look real far to find a Big 12 team. You have to look all the way down to West Virginia, and this isn't the best Big 12 year, but there's a long way between West Virginia and Texas at the top of this, and Oklahoma State and teams like Texas Tech. And if you watch the Big 12, there hasn't been that kind of gap this year. The teams are much more bunched up than that. Stanford, we know the West Coast has problems with RPI, and it's Stanford. You have to look into the teens this year, and if you look at all the human polls, that's not going to be where you see them. So there's some hits, some misses. It's RPI. It's not perfect, but it's what they've got.
Talking with Teddy Cahill this morning. Again, Baseball America hopping on with us to talk a little Arkansas. And SEC baseball. What have you thought about the different rules that have been incorporated in college baseball to this point? I've seen balks, I've seen various things that we've never seen before. How have those adjustments made their way to the college game?
Yeah, I mean, I think people have done a really good job at adjusting. I don't think it's really been that much of an impact in a negative way. The games are moving faster with the pitch clock, and I think that, that first weekend in Arlington, which I was not locked in on because I wasn't there. I was in Mississippi for the weekend. But from what I understand, that was a little rocky, but I haven't heard of anything like that since. And, so whether that was umpire adjustments or teams making adjustments or whatever, I think we've gone through, and I know opening weekend wasn't perfect around the country, but I think teams were able to make the adjustments and everyone's kind of figured out how to deal with these new rules. And I think they're by and large positive for college baseball.
Danny, I know here injuries have been a deal. You're talking about adjustments. Dave Van Horn and his staff have had to adjust, especially on the pitching side of things. South Carolina as well. I know we've seen Tommy Johns in different SEC. Does it feel like this season, especially in the Southeastern Conference, there's been a surplus of injuries relative to recent years?
I don't really think so. And, I've talked about this with a couple of people in the SEC, and honestly, I don't think it's that much worse in the SEC than it is elsewhere. I think there's just more attention on the SEC. Mm-hmm. So things get reported in the SEC and they rise to a very high level of notoriety that in other conferences, things are able to be put a little more under the radar because you don't have, 10,000 people in the stands every night and you don't have all the media at every game. So, there have been a lot of injuries. There's no doubt about it. There have been a lot of injuries on the mound, but I just kind of think that's baseball in 2023, and I'm not reading a ton into it.
Teddy, a few years ago, 11.75 scholarships and the limitations there were a constant conversation in college baseball. Seems like that's subsided a bit since NIL has come into its own. What effects are you seeing on this sport with the transfer portal and NIL? And is scholarship limitation still a conversation you're hearing much with coaches and athletes when you talk to them?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's ever gone away. Nobody's going to stop talking about that. What I think is that everybody realizes a huge opportunity was missed when the transformation committee didn't do anything about it. It's kind of hard to see how, having just gone through a situation where the NCAA tried to do, a major overhaul of a lot of their rules. And they had a committee dedicated to this with Greg Sankey, as strong a proponent of college baseball as you'll find out there, as one of the co-chairs of the committee, and they didn't get anything done on it. I don't know what it would take at this point. The NCAA seems to respond to lawsuits, but I don't know how you're going to find one for 11.7 or any of the other partial scholarship sports. As to NIL and the portal, obviously it's having an effect. I mean, just look at what Arkansas has been able to do with the portal. NIL has some effect. Strongly debatable how much of an effect it is. Obviously, some players are going to be driven by that when they're making their decisions, but the amount of money within college baseball for NIL is so minimal compared to what football and basketball have available to them that I don't think it's like this massive game changer. There's certainly players out there that are getting money, and certainly I'm sure there are players that have made decisions based on money. But frankly, in this sport, that's no different than it ever used to be because, if somebody's offering you 70%, somebody else is offering 30%, that's already a financial decision.
Teddy Cahill with us here on the Morning Rush. So we've seen Ole Miss and Mississippi State the last couple of years get to the College World Series championship round and win. Not necessarily always the best teams in baseball. The number one seeds had a long run of not finding the championship trophy at the end. What in your mind is the right formula now for a team to win the championship? It seems like being the number one seed doesn't have history on your side. Maybe, not having the best regular season seems to have some merit in recent years. In your mind, what is the right formula for the teams to kind of round out once they hit June?
There is no formula, I guess, is the easiest answer. You see teams win it in a variety of ways. You see teams that have won it that have been very pitching centric. You think about Vanderbilt in 2019 and having some of the guys they had on the mound. And then you think about last year with Ole Miss being maybe a little more offensive. I think ultimately what you need is a couple of starters that are in good shape going into June. You need somebody in the bullpen, like a couple guys in the bullpen that you feel good about. You don't need that many guys out there. A lot of coaches aren't going to use more than 6 or 8 guys during the postseason coming in off the mound. They just don't need it. And you need an offense that's able to score some runs. But TD Ameritrade Park for a long time, it was like, well, you couldn't base that offense based on home runs. Like, I think that's clearly changed now. I think you just need to have an offense that's ready to go and a solid defense behind the pitching.
Teddy, we'll leave it there this morning. Teddy Cahill again, Baseball America, national writer, jumping on with us, spending some time talking Arkansas, SEC baseball, and a little College World Series as well. Teddy, we appreciate it, man. Only a couple more weeks till we get to postseason baseball and about a month or so off to the College World Series.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot.
BetOnline.ag is your number one source for all your basketball info, stats, news, and scores. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest player reports for this year's pro basketball playoffs. BetOnline is always your sports information headquarters this season, as we have you covered for all your sports wagering needs. Basketball, MLB, NHL hockey, right down to UFC and boxing. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way for you to get your betting info, including live betting options and your favorite casino and card games you can play right from your home. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Be sure to use our promo code BELIEVE to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's BLEAV. BLEAV. Bet online, where the game starts.